Well, it is noon on YouTube, but it is 5 o'clock somewhere. The happy hour bar is open. It is Matthew Berry here. And you know what today is? Today is a Fantasy Life Friday. That is right. It's a Fantasy Life Friday. You know, I'm a company man. So I'm going to bring in my buddy, Matthew Freedman, at Matt F. the Oracle on Twitter. Matt, so people know who you are. In addition to a dad, you are, since 2020, you are the most accurate NFL mock drafter since 2020 by independent analysis. You've been a top 20 fantasy ranker in each of the past 5 seasons by independent analysis. You have over 100,000 followers in the Action Network app. And in addition to being an NFL analyst, you are also the head of branded content at FantasyLife.com at Matt F. the Oracle. Freedman, my brother, thanks for joining the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great finally to get to be on an episode with you, my overlord. And I have to say, I am jealous of the background that you have back there. I have just these hats. You have great looking liquor back there. It's great to be here on a Friday, noon. I feel like noon is like about the time where it's like maybe acceptable on a Friday.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, man.
To start entertaining the idea of an adult beverage. But it's always a good time to talk fantasy football as well. And the Hall of Fame game, it's like we have actual football, theoretically, actual football to talk about. It's a great time of year.
Yeah, we had actual football. We're going to get to that. And Sam Rockwell, what are you talking about, Stuntman Chuck? They're saying that you look a little bit like Sam Rockwell, the regulars in the house. It is a double Matthew show, as Fix It Fire mentioned as well. The regulars are already on fire. I understand. So in coming up today in the show, so we're going to talk about the Hall of Fame game last year. You know, Carson Beck, too early to talk Hall of Fame for Carson Beck. And then, so we'll talk about the Hall of Fame game. And then we've got Freedman's Fades. Right? Buckeye Man for life. Happy Friday, the regulars. Regulars drink free today. That is right. The regulars drink free every day, I believe. But we have Freedman's Fades. This is an article that is up for free on FantasyLife.com. But the 8 players you are fading at their current ADP. So we will talk about that. Freedman will go through that. And we have a couple of questions. The I don't know if you're aware, but the regulars, the fans of Happy Hour, my fellow drunks, they've started their own Discord. And so we have an incredibly active Discord. I encourage everyone to find the FFHH Discord. I'll tweet out the link later today. But anyway, it's really active, and so we have some questions from the Fantasy Football Happy Hour Discord. So so we'll do that. We'll do that really quickly. The last thing I want to do here, Freedman, because you know it is a Fantasy Life Friday, and I am a company man. Give me your best Fantasy Life pitch. Like, should we talk about Fantasy Life Plus, our 37 Tools premium product? Should we talk about Guillotine Leagues? Should we talk about just all the great content we have at Fantasy Life? Give me your best, 20 seconds pitch on FantasyLife.com.
Well,
I'm always doing it.
Yeah, I will say not only are you a company man, you are the company man. It is Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. So I think that's the starting point. It all comes down from the founder, the guy whose name is in the company title. And so just as Matthew Berry is excellent, we are an excellent website. We have great tools that are getting better every year. We have great rankings, great projections that are managed by Dwayne McFarland, who is, for my money, one of the best fantasy analysts, just, bar none. If I had to give a fantasy team to someone and say, hey, manage it for me, Dwayne would be one of the people I would give that to. And then just great people.
Who else is on that list?
The company.
Freedman, who else is on that list?
I would say Rich Rebar. I think Rich is incredibly sharp. Yep. I mean, yeah, you definitely hand it off to him. Sean Kerner, who does a lot of analytics at the Action Network, super sharp guy, can do projections for any sport, just cerebral. Yeah. So those are, if I had to kind of have like a Mount Rushmore of people I like spending time with in the industry and who are sharp and who I would trust to run a fantasy team of mine, those would be guys on the list.
So a couple of reactions there real quickly. Number one is I completely agree with you about Dwayne. Like, I think he's one of the best hires we've made in the history of Fantasy Life. I think he is, I know Adam Rank uses this, but I think Dwayne actually is your favorite fantasy analyst's favorite fantasy analyst. I really think Dwayne is that, truthfully that. I think Rich and Sean both do a great job. So I'm with you on that. I will say that was kind of an easy layup to suck up to me, your boss, and you missed it, candidly. So off to a poor start. No big deal. But, thank you for doing the show. We appreciate it. Might be a while before you're invited back. But in the meantime.
Look, I will say.
No, it's fine. Screw you. You can't come back from that, Freedman. It is what it is at this point. I literally gave you a layup. You could have just said, and obviously you or whatever. You could have just thrown it in at the end, but you didn't. I laid it out for you. It is what it is. It's fine. I'm not here for yes men. I'm not here for sucking up. I'm just pointing out, Freedman, that you had kind of an easy opportunity to brown nose without actually brown nosing, and you completely missed it. So just a heads up there.
Look, you're right. You're correct. But the thing is, I felt even if I made the obligatory small gesture, it would seem fake. And so I was giving you the honor of not coming onto your show and kissing up to you needlessly.
Yeah. Nice try. Nice try. But look, nice try is exactly what Carson Beck did in this Hall of Fame game last night. Now, listen, it's the first game of the season. It's a bunch of vanilla defenses. It's a bunch of guys that probably aren't going to make these teams. But, Freedman, talk to me about your reactions from watching last night's game. Even given all that, vanilla defense, practice squad guys or guys that are barely going to make the team, Carson Beck was better than I thought he was going to be.
Yeah, it's the Hall of Fame game. Although it's the Hall of Fame, you expect this to be one of the worst displays of football that you will see all year. And I have to say, wearing the dad hat, my wife gave birth to our daughter in April. It's sad that this had to be the first professional football event that she sees in her life. That said, Carson Beck made it somewhat entertaining. And even before this game, in the Fantasy Life game model projections that we have, we were expecting Carson Beck to play maybe 6 to 8 games this season. And I don't think anything that we saw last night would make us second guess that. I think if anything, it makes us think, yeah, he's got a very real chance of seeing significant playing time this season. Again, you mentioned Hall of Fame game preseason. Sometimes the football is subpar, but you like to see guys who can actually drop back, command the offense. In the huddle, it looks like they know what they're doing. They're able to run some of the 2-minute drill things. Like, he did the things to look like a professional quarterback last night in his first time on the field. That's more than you can say for a lot of guys who get drafted in the second, third, and fourth round. So Carson Beck, a long way to go, but he checked the box on his NFL debut.
Yeah, look, and Juan Lucerne, 6284, saying Carson Beck, ride or die. Sure, he's on the list. There's no question, Juan. There's no question. By the way, if you go to FantasyLife.com, I have a new column up, which is basically kind of the finalists for my ride or die candidates. It's all the suggestions from the team at Fantasy Life on who should be my ride or die this year. So I recommend you checking it out. I called the list a little bit, so everyone on the list is in consideration for my ride or die. But to your point, again, with all the usual caveats, you want Carson Beck to at least look a little bit better. You'd rather him look better than not. And the last thing I'll say here, on Beck is that, I think, right, you feel better about the fact that if something were to happen to Jacoby Brissett, that you feel like, okay, this is somebody that can get the ball to the guys we care about. I also think his dynasty stock just improved a lot. I think for people that are doing dynasty drafts, again, you don't want to overreact to one preseason game, but you sit here and if you're in a Superflex dynasty league that's deep, and so all the obvious guys are going to go, but later rounds, especially by the way, it's an already established dynasty league, and so you're just doing your rookie draft or whatever. And I know probably a lot of dynasty leagues have already had their rookie draft, but Carson Beck has a real shot at playing with real playmakers sooner rather than later. Because again, Jacoby Brissett is tell me you're down bad when you're not down bad. The Cardinals being held hostage by Jacoby Brissett, and also, by the way, Jacoby Brissett losing leverage because of Carson Beck. Again, tell me you're down bad without telling me you're down bad. Freedman, I want to move over to the other side of the ball too. I don't know that there's much to say about this game, but I do say that, one, it was fun to see Haynes King. So, I grew up in College Station, Texas. I root for Texas A&M. Haynes King is somebody that played for the Aggies before going to Georgia Tech. And look, it's the Panthers. He's third on the depth chart behind Bryce and Kenny Pickett. But it is worth noting that if Haynes King ever gets a spot start in the NFL, there's fantasy value there because of his legs.
Absolutely. Nailed it. It will be like one of those end of season. You got into the playoffs, but then your quarterback got injured. You pick up Haynes King off of the waiver wire because he's going to start at the very end of the season. And then all of a sudden, like, oh man, this guy just won me a championship because somehow he Tim Tebow'd it, right? You can like imagine that. Haynes King, yeah, absolutely. I don't think he really has a long-term NFL future, but to your point, if he ever gets to start, yeah, he will be fantasy viable right away because of the running ability.
I will say this, Freedman, by the way, you lead, in addition to all the other things you do for us at FantasyLife.com, you lead our coverage of college football. So, I mean, you do, you're a hardcore, X's and O's and film guy. You were kind of the lead of our, we did for the first time ever, Fantasy Life did an NFL draft preview magazine, which is available, everywhere, and you led the efforts there. A lot of your work is in that. So just in terms of if you follow Freedman and follow his work, he is somebody that understands sort of the rookies in a big way as well. But while, and we'll get you on to talk rookies at another time, maybe next year if I get over the Mount Rushmore comments. But let's talk with your fades here, Freedman. And I want to be very clear. These are Freedman's fades. Freedman's fades. Not easy for me to say.
It's a hard one.
I might be drunk already. Freedman's fades. So these are not my fades. These are Freedman's fades. And we start with Lamar Jackson. I admire you because so many times you see these do not draft lists and they're like, do not draft Haynes King. You know what I mean? Like, I'm out on, Sean Tucker. And you're like, all right, that's the third running back in the Bucs. You know what I mean? But like you are saying you're fading Lamar Jackson. So talk to me. I guess I probably should start this. What's the premise of the overall column? And then we'll get into Lamar.
So Matthew, I feel like you were one of the first people, if not the first person I ever heard kind of say this, articulate this in the fantasy industry. You can't win your draft in the early rounds, but you sure can lose it in the early rounds.
Yes.
And so everyone wants to find the league winners, right? Matthew, you have that column looking at, the ride or die. And it's great to find the league winners, but it's also, I think, just as important to avoid the landmines, right? To avoid the guys who are team killers. And I don't think Lamar Jackson is quite in that category, but I do think he carries more risk than a lot of people maybe want to acknowledge. And so I'll just say the ceiling with Lamar Jackson is awesome. Like the ceiling with Lamar is the best fantasy season we've ever seen because we have already seen him do that literally in his career. So like the ceiling is there. I think he should have won MVP in 2024. I think he's been the best quarterback in the league over the past 3 seasons, but 2026 is a new year. And with it come new circumstances. John Harbaugh and OC Todd Monken, they are gone. I have a lot of respect for what Monken did in that offense with that system the past 3 years. So maybe those changes are positive, but Monken helped Lamar become the most efficient passer over the past 3 seasons. Now he has a defensive-minded head coach in Jesse Minter. He has a first-time offensive coordinator in Declan Doyle, who has never called plays before in the NFL. We have no idea what that offensive environment is going to look like. And then on top of that, Jackson has missed 14 games to injury over the past half decade. Last season, with injuries, of course, he had a career low 26.8 rushing yards per game. He's 29 years old now. And so at some point, a running quarterback, as he ages, is just going to be a little less athletic and a little slower to bounce back from injuries. So we have Lamar Jackson, who is objectively awesome and I think should be ranked as a top 3 quarterback, still, I think, in an uncertain situation. And so as long as he's healthy, I don't think Jackson is going to underperform massively, but he's priced as a premium quarterback, which just makes me think of like, okay, if I'm going to pay up for a quarterback, I think I would rather pay up a little bit more for Josh Allen, who's been a top 2 fantasy quarterback every year since 2020, or I'd rather pay a little bit less for your guy, Jaden Daniels, or maybe even Jalen Hurts.
Good question for Martin's World 1987. How many frees can a Freedman free if a Freedman free to freeze? Woo. That's right. Take that, Valiant Vincent, thinking I've gotten too much Pinot early in the day. Pinot Matty can still bring it. I understand all of those points right here. And there is definitely more risk for Lamar Jackson, given where he goes, than there are with some of the other elite quarterbacks. To your point, I mean, Josh Allen, proud Fantasy Life investor, Josh Allen, of course, is rock solid. And I'll give you a couple of other stats that I think you didn't even add here. Over the last 2 seasons, Lamar Jackson has had 2 rush attempts inside the 5-yard line. Like, I mean, think about that. I mean, again, he's 29 years old. They've got King Henry. I don't think it's any shock that over the years that they've had Derrick Henry, all of a sudden they get inside the 5-yard line. Lamar Jackson has literally only 2 total rush attempts inside the 5-yard line over the last 2 seasons. So that makes sense, right? But I think Raise the Flag says, how can he say that but not fade? I think you're right. Here's my counter argument to me. And like, I have him at QB2, you have him at QB3 in terms of our ranks that are up at fantasylife.com. My take is, what's weird is that like I actually have him. I'm slightly lower on him in overall ADP just because I think quarterback is so deep this year, right? My argument on Lamar Jackson, and I think Lamar Jackson actually has a monster year, to be honest with you, and I'll give you my reasons why. So I'm not fading him, but I will say I am sort of fading elite quarterbacks. Just because I think the quarterback is so deep, and we'll talk about the next guy coming up. But like, I mean, we talked about this on the other show. Baker Mayfield's like 21. Like, you know, if Baker Mayfield, like it's so deep this year. It's the deepest I've ever seen it. But you bring up Declan Doyle and Jesse Minter as negatives. The new, Minter being the new head coach and Doyle the new offensive coordinator. I actually think those are positives. I think that this team is underperformed, and so I have no proof on this, but my sources have told me that the rumors is that at least later on towards his tenure in Baltimore, John Harbaugh was very easy on Lamar Jackson. That he just didn't like kind of what Lamar wants, he does. He's the star of the team. And from what I understand, again, I don't know John Harbaugh at all. I don't know Jesse Minter at all. But from what I've heard from people that do, is that Jesse Minter is a very much in-your-face guy. He is a get-in-your-face guy. And that one of the reasons he was brought in specifically is that he is somebody that's going to hold Lamar accountable and, really, really, kind of get in his face. I remember talking to Devin McCourty, my friend and former colleague at NBC. And Devin used to tell me that the reason they were so successful is that Bill Belichick was harder on Tom Brady than any other player on the team. Like the guy that he yelled at the most, the guy whose face he got in the most was Brady. And Devin was like everyone else on the team is like, you see Belichick just ripping Tom a new a-hole and like no one else can like complain about what he's yelling at you because you're seeing him dress down Tom. And he goes, and that's why I think the teams were so successful is because no one got it worse than Tom. And I think that my suspicion is that's what Jesse Minter is going to be doing this year on him. Remember in terms of last year in weeks 1 through 3, he was averaging over 27 points per game when he was fully healthy, Lamar Jackson. Also, and I don't have a stat for this, but you remember the 2 times that Aaron Rodgers was left out of the top 10 of the top 100 players in the NFL. The following year, he won the MVP each year. So you're sitting here, Lamar Jackson's going, I'm 69. I know he said it doesn't bother me, I don't care. But you're telling me it doesn't bother him? Of course it bothers him. So I'm just saying, I think Lamar Jackson, to me, I understand the premise. I'm with you in the fact that I'm fading overall elite quarterbacks because I think it's so deep, but I do think he has a huge year. Let's move on to another quarterback here, Freedman, and we'll try to go a little bit quicker here because I know we spent a lot of time. But Ved the FFHH regular says, what round in a 12-team draft would be buying low for Lamar? At what point, that's a good question, actually, Freedman. So you're understandably, you're fading him because of the cost, as we talked about. Like if you draft somebody like that high and he does get injured, which is always an issue with Lamar, or the new offense doesn't click, whatever reason, I get that. But at what point are you willing to pull the trigger on Lamar Jackson? Because you don't think he's a bad player, obviously.
No, he's a great player. So we have the ADP tool at Fantasy Life. And so you can see ADP across all the different platforms. And in the consensus, Lamar Jackson is QB2, going in, round 4-ish in that range. So I would say if he falls below Drake May, if he goes into round 5, round 6, even if he falls below Joe Burrow, or if Jaden Daniels, now with Stephon Diggs, ends up going higher than we expect. But if Lamar falls below Drake May and maybe Joe Burrow, then I would really start to consider Lamar Jackson, because I think, well, okay, at this point, he's not nearly as risky, right? So it's all about the ADP, all about the other quarterbacks who go around him.
But
I think
are you saying if he falls below, like, so you have him, where do you have him ranked? You have him ranked at QB3. You're saying if he goes below?
Yeah, I have him at QB3. So if he goes in the range where I think he should be ranked, if he goes as the QB3 instead of the QB2, or if he goes as the QB4.
Okay, understood.
So if he starts to fall down,
but he's
the
going
board,
like in the same round as May and Daniels and some of the Burrows, right? Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay,
yeah.
All right, great. Well, another quarterback that you are fading this year is Bo Nix. Bo Nix has been a top 10 fantasy quarterback both of his last 2 years. He leads the NFL in pass attempts over the past 2 seasons. We know we know that Davis Webb, former NFL quarterback Davis Webb, is going to be calling the plays this year for the first time, but it's still a Sean Payton offense. Mm-hmm. They add Jalen Waddle. So Freedman, why are we fading Bo Nix?
Okay. I will say I maybe hang on to my priors more than I should.
Okay.
I don't, just coming from college, I thought Bo Nix was a little bit overrated, pop gun kind of arm. All right. I think
Stuntman Chuck says, by the way, Stuntman Chuck, who's one of our regulars, says Bo Nix is the cover guy for the Do Not Draft episode. As a diehard Broncos and totally unbiased Broncos fan, I'm fuming. So Stuntman Chuck is fuming, and you're holding on to your priors. So I interrupted you, Freedman, but go ahead. Go ahead, explain yourself to specifically Stuntman Chuck. I don't care about anyone else. Just specifically explain yourself to Stuntman Chuck, who's one of our loyal listeners.
Look, did Stuntman Chuck like Tim Tebow back in the day?
I don't know.
I mean, was Tim Tebow a good player? No. Is Bo Nix?
He won a playoff game.
He did. He did win a playoff game.
Bo Nix led them. You can't get into NFL stuff. Bo Nix, first off, Tim Tebow was actually a good fantasy player. He was a terrible NFL quarterback, but Bo Nix was, Tim Tebow actually was like a top 10 fantasy quarterback on a points per game basis because of the rushing. And by the way, that's the argument for Bo Nix, right? Again, the rushing gets you there. They're aggressive in the passing attack. And from an NFL quarterback standpoint, he's just like, he's a guy that, led them to the AFC Championship game and probably the Super Bowl if he didn't get hurt. He played the game, but you know what I mean. He clearly was hurting in the second half.
I mean, Sam Darnold won a Super Bowl. Are we wanting to draft him? I don't think that Bo Nix is actually a good NFL player. That's the thing. Over the past 2 years, he's been number 32 in adjusted yards per attempt, right below Jacoby Brissett and right ahead of Mac Jones. I don't think he's actually that good of a player. I think he is incredibly fortunate to be attached to Sean Payton. And that is the thing, right? The NFL high, almost 1,200 pass attempts over the past 2 years. So he's in an offense that is moving quickly, that's throwing the ball a lot. And then he has just enough rushing production, 23.1 yards per game. But I think he wouldn't warrant consideration outside of super flex leagues if the Broncos didn't throw the ball as much. And then now,
but they do. The argument is they do. And my counter to you on Bo Nix is that I think you're probably right, that I don't think he's probably that good a quarterback in real life. He's a better fantasy life quarterback than a real life quarterback. Career 6.5 yards per attempt. To your point, out of the 33 qualified quarterbacks of the last 2 years, he's 28th, right? Andrew Likes Panthers says Haynes King over Bo Nix. Someone else pointed out that Tim Tebow did save a fan's life at Citi Field. So, let's go easy on the Tim Tebow slander. But all those things are still there. Like, he does still run. I guess my question to you is he's QB 15. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a QB 15. You have him at QB 14, actually. Like, so we both have him as like a mid-tier QB 2. Like, are you really fading? Is your argument that this is why I have him ranked outside the top 10, despite the fact that he's been a top 10 quarterback the last 2 years and he added Jalen Waddle? Is that your point?
It's twofold. It's twofold. So yes, there's that. I think also the transition to Davis Webb maybe doesn't go as smoothly as people expect. But then the other part of this is that at QB 14, I look at him and I think, all right, how strong of a chance does he have of really dunking on me and like finishing as a top 5, top 6 quarterback?
Yep.
I don't think he has that much chance of that. And then I think, would I rather just wait a couple quarterback spots and take Malik Willis, who, if things work out with him, even though he's in a terrible offense, he could run all over the NFL? Would I rather wait a little bit longer and take Tyler Shuck, who I think has just as much passing potential and just as much rushing potential, but who's cheaper? Like,
Right.
I would probably rather do those things. So it's not necessarily that it's totally about Bo Nix sucks. It's that I just think Bo Nix isn't going to dunk on me, and I'd rather wait a little bit longer to take quarterbacks that I think have a chance of being just as good.
Noted Haynes King supporter Andrew Likes Panthers says, what does that mean for Waddle if Freedman is right? So that's my question, Freedman, because one of the things that you do for us at FantasyLife.com, you've been very accurate about this over the last handful of years, is from independent analysis. But you are one of the people that do our projections. So like as part of a Fantasy Life Plus subscription, you get Freedman's projections and you do them for every single game. So how do your projections net out for Jalen Waddle, given the concerns on Bo Nix? And it sounds like, just if I'm hearing you, it's less about Bo Nix, the player, even though you're not a fan of him NFL-wise, but more about the cost of Bo Nix in terms of his current ADP, which is 107 overall, QB 15. We're just like, if I'm waiting that long for a quarterback, even in a super flex, I think there are guys that are cheaper. I'm with you on Tyler Shuck, by the way. He's one of my big sleepers this year. There are guys that I can wait. If I've waited that long, I can wait longer versus, that I like him as a mid-tier. But so I'm curious where your projections net out on Jalen Waddle, given your Bo Nix stance.
Yeah, so Waddle, I do like Waddle in general. And if we look at what he did last year after Tyreek Hill was injured, Waddle was number 1 in the league in air yard share. He was actually being used as a real number 1 wide receiver. We saw early in his career where he had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. Now he's going into an offense where, again, I don't have a lot of respect for the passer, but they are still throwing the ball a ton. And I think Waddle has a very good chance of being the number 1 receiver in that offense. So, like what Waddle did early in his career, where he has around 1,000 to 1,200 yards receiving, that's the range where I would project him.
All right, fair enough. So, all right, so you understood on Bo Nix. Hopefully, Stuntman Chuck has calmed down a little bit here. So, I think, honestly, for my take, I understand your point in terms of where it is. For me, actually, Stuntman Chuck says, my neighbor just knocked on my door and asked if everything is okay. He heard screaming. Hopefully, you're all right. Fair enough, Stuntman Chuck. I get it. I understand. Freedman has that effect on people. For me, I can't remember. He's consensus QB 15, right? That is basically where he is. That's where he's going in the industry. Neither of us are off market here. But I can't remember a year when a quarterback as good as Bo Nix has been QB 15. Is Bo Nix the best QB 15 in fantasy football history? Again, I'm talking fantasy football, not real life NFL. But seriously, again, there's a long track record of Sean Payton throwing the ball all over the place and having fantasy-friendly offenses. The fact that he has a former NFL quarterback now calling the plays, I don't think Davis Webb is going to be as a former NFL quarterback, what we should really do is we should hand off to R.J. Harvey a lot more. They're going to be a pass, a passing offense. I do think the addition of Waddle opens up a lot of different stuff. And we saw flashes last year from a lot of their guys, the Marvin Mims and Pat Bryants of the world, and obviously you've still got Sutton there. I think again, hopefully assuming the ankle is fully healthy, I think he has, I think he has top 10 upside, which has been the last 2 years, which is at, QB 15 is fine. This one is interesting to me. Your next fade here. It's friend of the podcast, Jonathan Taylor. This is a guy who's been a former number 1 running back in fantasy football, Jonathan Taylor. This is somebody who, in weeks 1 through 13 last year, with Daniel Jones healthy and starting, was the second best running back in fantasy football. He was averaging almost 25 points a game. He had 132 scrimmage yards per game. Why do you hate Jonathan Taylor, Freedman?
Whoa. I don't hate him. I don't hate him.
Fair enough.
I don't hate him.
All
but
right.
I will say, I hate that he's going in round 1.
Okay.
And so I would
So
rather.
it's more about ADP. Again, the fades is I'm just, We've got a clickbaity headline, which, good for us. I'm out here in these internet streets. Yeah, I'm going to be clickbaity as all hell. But to be clear, Freedman, you're not saying you hate the player. You more or less hate the price.
Exactly. But the thing is, Jonathan Taylor never falls out of round one, which means I'm fading him because I'm never drafting him at that cost. I would rather wait and draft someone like Derrick Henry. And to be clear, everything you said about Jonathan Taylor, awesome season last year, almost 2,000 yards, 20 touchdowns from scrimmage.
Second in the NFL in red zone touches, third in goal to go attempts. Like, they getting close. He gets the rock. Yeah.
Awesome player. He's an awesome player, but he has missed 16 games over the past half decade. The durability concerns with him are real. I have zero durability concerns with Derrick Henry. Even though Derrick Henry is
33 years old and has had 8 billion touches.
Even though he's old, the dude is like a Terminator.
He
right?
is.
I mean, like, he hasn't been injured at any point in the past half decade. He's like missed one game. That's it. We look at what he's done over the past 2 years, and Derrick Henry almost on like a per touch basis, per game basis, he's right there with Jonathan Taylor. And so I think, okay, Derrick Henry, healthy, not going to get injured. We know what his role is within that offense next to Lamar Jackson. And then you look at the Colts, questionable quarterback situation. And then Jonathan Taylor has missed 16 games over the past half decade. It's like, Jonathan Taylor's great. I would just rather wait a half round and get Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I guess my only argument to that, and we're way apart. I mean, like, you have him at, 15th overall, running back 7 in your ranks. I'm at 8 overall, running back 4. So I'm as a first rounder. I have him as a top 8 pick. Again, as you sort of sit here and say, like, listen, the ceiling on some of these guys is capped, right? As you said, like with Bo Nix, like, it's not going to get dunked on. Like, the odds of Bo Nix becoming the number 1 quarterback in fantasy are fairly slim, right? But Jonathan Taylor being number 1 running back in fantasy is very much in play.
Yeah.
And I would argue that it's probably not the case with Derrick Henry, unless, again, that he would need you to score 20, 25 touchdowns, which, by the way, entirely possible with Derrick Henry. But Jonathan Taylor, who isn't used as much in the passing game, but certainly when he has been effective, as Brian Hickman 3612 says, the last fantasy season I faded Jonathan Taylor, he took my soul. So soulless Brian Hickman, which, by the way, that should be your name from now on, soulless Brian Hickman. You don't have it anymore. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor took it. So soulless Brian Hickman says that, I'm a Shane Steichen believer. I understand the concerns about Daniel Jones and is he healthy and everything like that. But if they can involve Taylor a little bit more in the passing game, like, we think this is a pretty good offense. And there's, I think you could argue that there's less competition for touches. Like, Jonathan Taylor's never been in a concern for touches, but with Michael Pittman gone, Alec Pierce dealing with his own injuries, right? Like, you could see Josh Downs, it's Tyler Warren, it's Jonathan Taylor. This is going to be a ball control, West Coast, low ADOT kind of offense that's just sort of, 10 yards at a chunk, just trying to just grind out drives after drive after drive. And so Dan Vandy says, all right, what receiver are you taking then? If you're at the end of the first round, Freedman, and you're like, I don't want any part of Jonathan Taylor, which one are you sort of taking there? Because before you answer that, because I think one of my other arguments for Jonathan Taylor, why I have him here, is also about sort of, as I put together my top 200, as I sort of think about draft strategy and what I'm doing in a draft. And so the wide receivers that are going around that range also have question marks, right? The Nico Collins, Rashee Rices of the world, right? That have, like, we think Nico Collins is awesome, but for whatever reason, they can't figure out how to get him the ball consistently. And he's got his own injury concerns. Rashee Rice keeps doing stupid stuff. Like, it just, there's a couple of wide receivers in that range that you can sort of poke holes at as well, whether it's injury history or a bad quarterback or what have you. So Dan Vandy has a good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So looking at the ADP tool that we have at Fantasy Life, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jonathan Taylor, James Cook, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson. I would be happy to get any of those 3 wide receivers and then to take Derrick Henry in the second round. And someone had posted the question, Derrick Henry over JT. No, I have JT ranked ahead of Derrick Henry. It's just at cost. I would rather get Derrick Henry a round later and take one of those wide receivers in round 1.
All right, fair enough. Right. Fair enough. I mean, I could argue the other side of it. Like, again, Amon-Ra is like, I think he's rock solid, right? SEC Man says the chat feels more like a snarling gang of Wolverines today. I don't know what's going on in the chat, so I can't really see it, but usually the chat for the show is very supportive. So, wow, we've on a Friday, we've got everyone's bile up. All right, everyone play nice in there. It's a bar. Don't make me send the bouncer in and throw everyone out. Bouncer Ed, don't make me send him in there and kick anyone out. Everyone play nice in the mean streets there.
I think it makes sense that the chat, like, it's, love, hate. This episode is much more about hate than about love. And so I think it makes sense that the chat might pick up on that.
Stuntman Chuck, we should have a brotherly segment at the end of the show. I'm going to do that. You know what? I mean, now that I own the show and I can sort of do what I want, I can drink on the show. I can sort of do whatever I want. I'm waiting. I want an alcohol sponsor. But so heads up to any advertisers watching. When we get an alcohol sponsor, glug, glug. And when we have our set built, we're getting our set built, which is going to be a much more fuller bar set and everything like that. Then we'll have some fun there. Maybe we'll do some shots. I guess, look, you could. CeeDee Lamb's had his own injury issues. He's got to deal with George Pickens. Justin Jefferson. Like, we don't know what's going to happen with Kyler. We think he's going to be better than JJ McCarthy, but we also think, we also saw like he couldn't get the ball to Marvin Harrison, so who knows on him. And then who's the? Oh, and Amon-Ra. You said, yeah, I agree with you on Amon-Ra. I have him ahead of JT. But yeah, understood the argument there. You have another running back here, and I think I get the argument here, which is Breece Hall. And obviously there's injury concerns. There's also the fact that this is a guy that's never had a season with more than 5 rushing touchdowns. And the Jets obviously are the Jets. All that said, Frank Reich, when he was Frank Reich, who's going to be calling the plays for the Jets, obviously, when he was the head coach of the Colts, 2018 to 2022, those 4 years, the Colts were actually 7th in running back receptions during Frank Reich's tenure. So, that's really the argument, is how much passing game work does Breece Hall get? I think he gets a lot. So I'm at running back 15. I'm at 32 overall. I'm at 42 overall. So you're around behind me on Breece Hall. Give me your thoughts there on the Jets running back.
Yeah, good player. And I would say he's made the best of bad circumstances. And when you say he's never had more than 5 rushing touchdowns in a season, that's just another way of saying he's been on the Jets for his entire career. Yeah. And you mentioned Frank Reich, who I think earlier in his career was much more innovative, but I think his system has become increasingly stale. And so we look at his past 2 NFL offenses, the 2022 Colts, the 2023 Panthers, both of them were bottom 3 units in scoring. I think the 2026 Jets might actually be worse than last year's team, which was 3-14, and that's saying something. And Dwayne McFarland, who does manages the projections at Fantasy Life, again on my Mount Rushmore, Matthew, along with you.
Stop it! It's too late. That ship sailed.
Too late. He wrote a great article on the site, which everyone should check out, talking about what matters for running backs in fantasy football. And the guys who are on terrible teams, they rarely become league winners. Like, I think Breece Hall, despite the talent that he has, at best is just going to be like a solid RB2. But man, if things go really sideways for that Jets team, like, a great player could just have his season submarined.
Yeah. Stuntman Chuck said this, I think it was Stuntman Chuck who said basically, he was giving you crap for like, oh, really, you're fading a Jet? And Ryan Hudson saying Breece Hall fade is something that this chat can get behind. Listen, you animals. I'm just going to say this right now. You're not allowed to give Freedman, shit about, fading a Jet. I mean, this is a guy he's fading Lamar Jackson and Jonathan Taylor and Bo Nix. Like, say what you want, but Freedman's got some cojones there. So I admire that. I guess my take on Breece Hall is that I think the receptions, I agree with you. There's a ceiling that's capped, right? I think if everything goes as well as it could for Breece Hall, maybe he's running back 10, right? Like, I think it's hard to imagine a scenario where he outperforms a McCaffrey or a Bijan or a Gibbs or, any of even a Jonathan Taylor, but I do think the passing game involvement will be there. I do think that keeps his floor higher. And I think Geno's going to be better than people think. I'm not saying Geno's going to be great, but the Jets have been so abysmal for so long because they've literally had like, league worst quarterback play. And I think Geno Smith, we had Connor Rogers on yesterday, my buddy Connor Rogers, who covers the Jets backwards and forwards, does a great job, works for SNY among 8 million other things that he does. And he was just like, Geno's actually looking great in practice. He was actually at Jets camp on Tuesday. And if Geno, and I've talked to scouts around the NFL, Freedman, I remember going to the combine and talking about like who, all this quarterback shuffling and where's Tua going to go and, where's Cousins going to get a gig and Flacco and all these guys that were sort of free agents. And a lot of people told me Geno Smith is somebody that a lot of people are interested. The Vikings were in on Geno Smith. He obviously winds up with the Jets, but a lot of people told me like Geno's tape from last year is not bad. That offense around him was so brutal. It was such a dysfunctional system, just nothing was happening in the worst offensive line in football. But like, if you look at it, it was all scheme based and it was all just like Geno. It's not like they were basically saying like, not that Geno's great, but that Geno's last year in Seattle, he's not that far off from that, right? Martin Anzadula says Freedman would feign Santa Claus if this was a Christmas special. That's true.
Great line.
Yeah, that is a great line.
And accurate.
And I'm sure, of course. Yes. The Fadeler. Yeah, that's a great one. The Fadeler. Absolutely. Freedman is now the Fadeler. Anyway, I think Geno's going to be like the 17th best quarterback in the NFL, the 20th best quarterback. As long as he's like Seattle Geno and he's like reasonably competent, I think this offense will be good enough to be, within the range of competent. So we're on different sides of Breece Hall, but I think we're probably closer on T. Higgins. We both have him at wide receiver 16. I'm at 36 in ADP in my overall. You have him at 35. Believe it or not, we are both actually higher on him. Consensus is ADP is 41. So we both have him around the same time. Around the same range, and we're higher on overall consensus. But why do you think you won't wind up with T. Higgins on your team this year?
I just think there's a really low ceiling with him unless Jamar Chase gets injured. And I will say, I think T. Higgins as a player is actually super talented. And if we look at their 5 years together, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins without Chase has had 90.3 yards receiving per game. You look at Chase without Higgins, 86.4. Like when Higgins has had the opportunity to be like a true alpha, he's actually fit the bill. The problem is when Chase is there, Higgins has 63.4 yards receiving per game, right? And then also you add on the injuries. He has missed 16 games over the past half decade. So you put all that together and it means he's never had a season of more than 110 yards, never had a season of even 1,100 yards receiving. The only way he absolutely crushes ADP is if the Bengals offense just somehow suddenly goes off with Zach Taylor as the play caller. I don't think that's going to happen. Or if Jamar Chase gets injured and then we see T. Higgins just get all of those targets to himself. Otherwise, I think Higgins has a normal season for him, like 900 yards and 9 touchdowns, and that's fine, but I don't think he's going to be someone who breaks the league for you. And he's still going high enough to where at that point, I want to find someone who I think has a ceiling, not just a really nice floor.
Yeah, look, he's finished higher than wide receiver 23 in utilization score only once in the past 4 years, 12 missed games since 2023 on his own right. And you're right. As long as Jamar Chase, proud Fantasy Life investor Jamar Chase, is healthy, the ceiling on T. Higgins is capped. And there's some other guys going around his range where you could see there are scenarios, there are easier paths to elite top 5 fantasy production than there necessarily is for T. Higgins. But we like the player and we like the offense. And so, again, I will just say that for me, especially if I went running back in one of the first 2 rounds, if T. Higgins is my number 2 wide receiver, I'm fine with that. There's, you're trading a little bit of upside, but I don't have a problem with him as a number 2 wide receiver, but I certainly understand the argument. I don't understand the argument, or I don't agree with the argument. That's a better way to put it. I don't agree with the argument on Jordan Addison, but I'm pretty sure I understand it. You have him at 121 overall. I'm at 96. And so his ADP is 108. So you are significantly below the market on Jordan Addison. which feels like a weird one. Like with Jordan Addison, why am I catching shrapnel? What's going on here? Why do you hate Jordan Addison? Why is he your Santa Claus?
So great question. Great way of phrasing it. Mr. Berry, you have a way with words, let me say. So two things with this. One is that there, as you mentioned earlier, there are the questions with that Vikings offense, especially at quarterback. Even if Kyler is the quarterback, does he play to the level that we want him to play at? And then I would say the second thing with Jordan Addison, and for me, the bigger thing is that he has almost no chance of becoming the number one wide receiver within his offense.
Yeah.
Right? Unless Justin Jefferson misses half of the year. Almost no chance. If you look at a number of the other wide receivers,
but he's going in the 11th round. I mean, it's hard, you know. Okay, he's going in the 11th round, Freedman. And we're not expecting Guy to be the number one wide receiver in fantasy, or even the number one fantasy wide receiver on his team for guys going in the 11th round.
Well, no,
generally.
but look at some of the guys going around him. Quentin Johnston. He actually kind of has been low key the number one wide receiver for the Chargers over the past 2 years. Jacoby Myers actually has a shot of being the number one wide receiver for the Jags. Wan'Dale Robinson, the PPR cheat code. Jaden Reed might be the best receiver for the Packers this year. Josh Downs might be the best receiver for the Colts. And so I just look at these other guys going around him. And as you mentioned, you can imagine.
You've actually convinced me. You're right. Like I like all those guys. Keep going. But that's a great point.
Imagine the path that they have to fantasy relevance. And then imagine the path Jordan Addison has to fantasy relevance. All of those guys have an easier path.
Yeah, H. Grow says, don't forget, Juwan is going to steal targets from Addison. I don't know, third and Juwan. Yeah, third and Juwan. Right, Juwan Jennings is there as well. If TJ Hawkinson another year healthier, does he get a little bit? We've seen Kyler use the tight end more than I think they have, perhaps. So I think there's an argument there. The positive on Addison, the pro Addison argument here is that in the 46 games that Jordan Addison has played, he's got 35 end zone targets. He's had double-digit end zone targets in every single season of his career. 13.7 ADOT last year, which was fourth among wide receivers that saw at least 75 targets. Like, again, new quarterback, but still the same system, right? And just, whatever you think of Kyler Murray, you have to believe he's going to be more accurate, especially down the field, than J.J. McCarthy was last year. And so I think that's the argument on Addison. I think he's a nice player. I like him. I agree with your argument that Jacoby Myers has a shot at being the number one Jags wide receiver, that, certainly Josh Downs very likely is going to be the number one Colts wide receiver, on. So some of the guys in that range have, quote, number one wide receiver in the team. But, there's also, Jordan Addison could have, 8 touchdowns this year. Right? I mean, anyway, so I'm just, anyway, again, he's my wide receiver 44. He's your wide receiver 48. I'm at 96 overall, so I am inside my top 100. But I definitely understand that argument a lot better after talking about it, because there's some real choices there. And the other thing that I think is interesting about that argument is just think about the names you just read. Whether it's we like Jacoby Myers a lot, we like Josh Downs a lot. When you said Addison, and I forget there was somebody else you said around that range.
Jaden Reed, Wan'Dale Robinson,
Wan'Dale Robinson, especially reunited with Brian Daboll, and I think they're going to be throwing. I think Cam Ward will be better this year. So Wan'Dale Robinson and Jaden Reed, who if he can stay healthy, right, and less target competition now in Green Bay, that Dobbs and Dontavian Wicks are out. So Ved says Niners will trade for Addison midseason. I could see it. I could absolutely see it. Maybe not even midseason. They need wide receiver help right now. But I think it's just a larger point, Freedman, about the fact that wide receiver is sneaky deep this year. And so it's one of the more arguments for why you probably want to do a running back in one of the first 2 rounds. We can talk about that a little bit later. But all right. Somebody's going to make a clickbaity headline about this, because Trey McBride, friend of the show, multiple time friend of the show, Trey McBride, is on your fades list. I love Trey McBride, by the way. Trey McBride follows me on Instagram. I will never say anything bad about Trey McBride. I've met him multiple times. He's an awesome human being. He's come on our show, I think, 3 or 4 years in a row. We love ourselves some Trey McBride here. So I just want Trey McBride and all the Trey McBride fans, all the trailers, all the McBrideans to know that we don't stand for this slander. Freedman is alone on an island on this one. What do you got?
Okay, I will say out of all of the fades on this list, Lamar Jackson, Jonathan Taylor, this is the one that I am most scared of.
Sure.
Because I mean, those other players are great, but Trey McBride last year was just amazing. And over the past 2 years, number two in the league in targets and receptions, number six in receiving yards. Last season, the 11 touchdowns. He's basically a wide receiver playing tight end, and I am in fear that he's just going to dunk on me this year, and I'm going
Yeah.
to get Cardinals fans, Trey McBride investors, messaging me about how I don't know anything about anything, and they're not wrong. But look, what I look at with Trey McBride is I think he's in the same tier with Brock Bowers. I have Bowers projected ahead of him, and on ESPN on Sleeper, McBride goes as the number one tight end off of the board. And so I just think that's wrong. If you're in a league where McBride falls to you as the number two tight end, and I've even seen it where Colston Loveland getting some hype, I've seen McBride actually fall to the number three tight end. Amazing value. I would love to get him there. I just don't want to be the guy who drafts the first tight end and have that be Trey McBride. If I can get him at tight end two, love it.
Blind Boy Johnny says Freedman is now a god. I have Bowers over McBride. So you're starting to win over some of the chat here. But and I understand the argument in this sense that you are fading the idea of Trey McBride as number one tight end overall. That you have Bowers at one, which by the way, so do I. Lakers since the 80s says fading all pros for the win. Look, I mean, it's a ballsy call. I give you that. So I have McBride at tight end too, just like you do. We both have him at 22. Actually, we have the exact same rank. Market ADP has him at 22 overall as well. So we're all in line with market. But I know I've been in drafts where I've seen Trey McBride go number one. And here would be my argument, just to present a counter of like if you've already drafted and you drafted Trey McBride number one, why I'm okay with it, or why if I was in a league and I saw somebody take McBride one, I wouldn't be like, what's that guy doing? And you referenced early in the show that like one of the things I think I was the first person to say is like you can't win your league in the first round, but you can lose it. And the other thing that I think I was the first person to say is like you don't have to finish as the number one player at a position to be worth drafting as the number one player in the position. Because along with that same rule, the idea here is that what you're drafting at the elite levels is you're drafting floor. You know what I mean? You obviously always want upside, but you're really drafting floor. You like because whatever. It's something like the studies that we've done, 30% of your starting score generally comes from your first two picks. And then, where you end up winning is when you're in the margins and you find those late round guys that pop. And so I think Trey McBride, the anti-Bowers, Bowers has a new quarterback, new system, not a lot of competition around him, which you're like, okay, great, it's going to be a massive target share, but also like, what if every defensive coordinator is just like, F it, man, we're going to triple team Brock Bowers and we'll take our chances with Trey Tucker or whatever it is, right? That like every defensive coordinator, he's also somebody that he missed a lot of time last year. Bowers was just not healthy, right? And so is that like just, he had one bad year, or is that something that could continue? Trey McBride has come on our show every single year. The regulars know this. Every single year he comes we do Radio Row, and McBride comes on every single year. And we ask McBride, give us your projection for this year. And for like 3 years in a row, he's just like, I'm going to have 100 catches. I'm going to have 1,000 yards. I'm going to have 10 touchdowns. Last year was the first year that the touchdowns came true, but like every year, like he's just, he's a guy that like, has, basically 1,000 yards and 100 receptions. And so I think that there's just a, like what we talked with Josh Allen. I don't know that Trey McBride finishes as the number one tight end in fantasy football, but I think barring an injury, there's no way he finishes outside the top three.
I think that's fair. The one rebuttal I will have, and they mentioned it here on the screen, I think that there's a possibility we see a lot of Carson Beck this year for the Cardinals. And
raise the flag saying Hall of Fame MVP, future Hall of Famer Carson Beck throwing the ball halfway through the year. Raise the flag says that's scary. After last night, maybe that's a good thing.
Maybe.
No, jokes aside. Okay, there's a chance we see Carson Beck in the second half of the year for sure.
Yeah, and so I think that could make the offense go sideways really quickly. So although McBride on his own, I think is sort of insulated, right? He's like the guy within that offense. And I think he probably still finishes top three at the position in targets. If he's in a bad offense in the second half of the year, I think that's going to make his investors, I wouldn't say regret drafting him, but just have to suffer the unfortunate consequences of a guy who's underperforming when it matters the most in fantasy.
Max Q7007 says, just fade McBride and Bowers and draft Loveland in the fourth. Well, I get that. I mean, listen, Colson Loveland's on the short list for ride or die. I think he's going to have a monster year. I think I'm not alone in thinking that. A lot of people are on the Colson Loveland bandwagon. Hey, in our Discord, Freedman, we asked people, so everyone should go check out Freedman's Fades. There's more analysis there. There's more names in there. Go check out Freedman's Fades on FantasyLife.com. It's free. Go check it out. Great article. And you can, while you're there, you can check out my article, which is up in my ranks, which are all free, of course, at FantasyLife.com. I'm a company man. So a couple of questions that came in on our Discord, and I encourage everyone to join our Discord. It's a great group. Despite the Bo Nix anger that came up today, generally speaking, the Discord is a really awesome group, really energetic and smart fantasy players. And so it's just a great group. I highly recommend getting into the Fantasy Football Happy Hour Discord. And like I said, I'll tweet a link. So just look through my social media on X. All right, so BG in the Discord said, Freedman, in a 10-person, 3-keeper league, I'm looking to choose between Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, or Justin Jefferson for my first-round pick. Your thoughts?
These were the wide receivers we talked about earlier.
Sure.
I would go with Amon-Ra St. Brown, just been a certified just boss for the past 3 years. Super high floor, great offense, no questions about him.
Fourth straight season with at least a 27% target share. The only wide receiver to score at least 300 or more fantasy points, PPR scoring, in each of the past 3 seasons. All right, Fix It Fire says, I usually, speaking of tight ends, we just had a whole tight end conversation, but Fix It Fire says, I usually wait on tight end, but I really like Tyler Warren. But I also know I can get productive tight ends later. At what point should, quote, get your guys override your stance in strategy? It's a good question.
Yeah, good question. I mean, I would say I think some of it depends on how much you really love Tyler Warren, like how convicted you are that he is significantly better than Tyler Kraft, Harold Fannin, Sam Laporta, Kyle Pitt. Because if you have him up there in that tier with McBride and Loveland, then you think you're still, even at ADP, getting a value. But if it's like he's your guy, but you really don't have the conviction in him relative to Kraft, Fannin, Laporta, Pitts, Kittle, then I think you just kind of wait and you take the value as it comes to you in your draft at the position.
I think he's closer to the upper tier. Like, I mean, we talk about, hey, chance that this guy is the number one person on their team. We've talked about throughout the, like, there's absolutely a very real scenario where the most productive fantasy pass catcher on the Colts is Tyler Warren.
Yes.
Right? Again, it's going to be middle of the field stuff, healthy Daniel Jones. Like, we know the talent is there. He was hot early. He faded down the stretch, but like they're going to use him in some tush push situations as well. So there's absolutely a scenario where Tyler Warren is the number one pass catcher, has the most fantasy points of all the pass catchers on the Colts, and could be in the Colston, Loveland, Bowers, McBride, closer to them. Like a clear number 4 versus down in the Laporta, Kyle Pitts range.
Yeah.
So I'm a big Tyler Warren fan, but Fix It Fire, I'll just say this to answer the second part of your question, which I think is a better one. At what point should you, quote, should get your guys override your stance strategy? And my answer is immediately, always, starting in the first round. Because look, at the end of the day, it's fantasy football, man. It's fake football. We do this for fun, right? Like, get your guys. Like, there's no right or wrong. The minute the first game kicks off, all rankings are out the window. Like, all rankings are out the window. And think about where, trying to think of like a good example from last year is, but like, think about where people had, when we talked about Lamar Jackson. Think about where people had Lamar Jackson last year and then where he finished, like if you, think about, how you think about Ashton Genty at this time last year versus where he ended up finishing. Like, I mean, you could pick a zillion examples. Like, as soon as the first kickoff happens, rankings are all out the window. And I'm always a big believer in is that, you should always get your guys. I get questions all the time, Freedman. I'm sure you do too, where I'll get a version of this question every single day. Be like, I've got the 6th overall pick, but I love Ken Walker this year. Is that too early for Ken Walker? Right? And you'll be like, for me in my ranks, yes. But the truth of the matter is like, he's not falling to you in the second round. Assuming it's a 12-team league. Like, I'd be shocked if he's there in the second. So if you want Ken Walker, if you're like, I think this guy's going to be, I'm a big Chiefs fan. I think he's going to be, the number one running back in fantasy. Then like draft Ken Walker. Like you're not going to lose your league because you have drafted Ken Walker, like 6 spots ahead of ADP. Like, you know what I mean? I get too much of that. Yeah. Like I believe in Jeremiah Love, but I got the 10th pick. Is that too early? Nah, dude. Like I'm like 5 spots later or whatever. But like, you're not losing your league because you jumped around on ADP or you were 6 spots higher. So fix it, fire. I'm a big believer in get your guys whenever. Like we're doing this for fun, man. It's a hobby. Like get the guys you want to root for. Because with injuries and just, you never know how it's going to ultimately play out. All right. One more here from Chaster. A lot of the years, the value of running backs largely depends on the overall health of the players at the position. The last few years, it seems like running backs drafted in the first 2 rounds have been relatively healthy. Do you think this perceived stability is causing the major cluster of those 6 to 8 running backs we are seeing around the 1-2 turn? And is that a potential trap that just basically, hey, we're backing on running backs high up because they've stayed healthy, especially these older running backs have stayed healthy? Is that a trap, Freedman? Or is it just a matter of, how the draft is going? And where the value is.
Yeah, I think this is a great question. So part of it, I think, has to do with the fact that passing has decreased in the league over the past 3 years. And so with that, you see running backs relative to offensive production in general starting to stand out more. And then also, I think there's a pretty big teardrop for me between the guys going in the first and second rounds at running back and the guys going after that. And so I think that is also part of the market dynamics of people looking at the position and thinking, well, I've got to get one of these guys. Because if I don't, I'm just kind of floating in an uncertain sea of like Breece Halls and Kyron Williamses, right? And so it's a situation, I think, where there's just so much desire to get one of these guys that is driving prices up. And so I will say, I don't know if it's necessarily a trap, but I do think it is creating value for some of those other positions in round 1, like Brock Bowers for rounds 1 and 2, Brock Bowers, for example, or some of these wide receivers who go in round 2. So I wouldn't say it's a trap, but I do think I'm fine only getting one of those running backs in rounds 1 and 2, and then addressing one of the other positions to have some balance, because I think there might be a little bit of inflation at the running back position.
That's fair enough. I also, again, you've got some question marks at wide receivers that we sort of talked about, but I completely agree with your answer there, Freedman. So, well, you end on an agreement. Look at that. You and I on the same page. Great answer. Everyone go follow him on social media at Matt F. The Oracle, obviously from that episode of the league, Matt F. The Oracle on X. And go look at all of his stuff on FantasyLife.com. It's fantastic. He is one of our stars. He is a friend and a scholar. Matt, congratulations. Freedman, thank you so much for doing the show. Look, it's closing time, everyone, which means you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. We are back on Monday, live at noon, with my buddy JJ Zachariason joining the happy hour. So I'm excited to have JJ on the show. He's never been on the show before, so I'm excited to have JJ on Monday. Everyone have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday. Peace out.